Hello, this is Jeremiah Regan, and I have some great news. We've brought Hillsdale's incredibly popular free online courses to the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. The Hillsdale College Online Courses Podcast brings you our online courses in their entirety, with courses ranging from ancient history and biblical epics to foundational political principles and the future of American citizenship. Follow the Hillsdale College Online Courses Podcast to hear new episodes every week with additional commentary and insights from our team. Go to podcast.hillsdale.edu to learn more. That's podcast.hillsdale.edu.
Welcome to the Hillsdale College K-12 Classical Education Podcast, bringing you insight into classical education and its unique emphasis on human virtue and moral character, responsible citizenship, content-rich curricula, and teacher-led classrooms. Now your host, Scott Bertram.
We continue a series of episodes from presentations delivered at Hoogland Center for Teacher Excellence seminars. The Hoogland Center for Teacher Excellence, an outreach of the Hillsdale College K-12 Education Office, offers educators the opportunity to deepen their content knowledge and refine their skills in the classroom. These one-day conferences are hosted during the academic year in cities across the nation and feature presentations by Hillsdale College faculty, K-12 office staff, and leaders in the Hillsdale network of member schools. There is no cost to attend, and attendees may earn professional development credits. Currently, the Hoogland Center is hosting a series exploring the art of teaching a variety of subjects. To learn more about upcoming events, visit our website, k12.hillsdale.edu.
During my first year of teaching, I witnessed firsthand the power of a quality literature story with a student who came from a really rough home life and really struggled with reading. After her grandfather passed away, she told me I knew what I was supposed to do. She explained that she had cried when she heard her grandfather pass away because Sir Lancelot had cried at the death of King Arthur, and Little John at the death of Robin Hood. This child felt sad about the things she ought to feel sad about. Where did she learn this? A story. Stories awaken us to know what is right, good, true, and beautiful. But they also train the heart to respond with proper emotion to the present situation. As educators, we strive to teach our children morals, but oftentimes it feels as if it is not enough. There needs to be a connection between these rules or virtues and their affections or feelings to help students truly care and act on the things they ought to love. Stories help us learn what we ought to feel, how we ought to respond to things that are beautiful, and how we ought to respond to evil and hardship. Through a good story, children can imagine themselves in the stories and imagine what must be done. It is truly a safe place to learn where the consequences are not real, but the lessons are. We can talk about courage and try to define it, but a stronger case and impression about courage comes from reading the tale of Despereaux, where a pathetic little mouse risks everything to encounter beauty. Or from The Hobbit, where Bilbo stands up to Old Smaug's curse that threatens to tear down his courage. We can talk about sacrifice and try to define it, but when we read The Red Badge of Courage, it is no longer an abstract idea. Through the growth of Henry Fleming from a selfish child to a selfless soldier who risks his life for his comrades, sacrifice becomes real to us, and we wonder when we can use it in our lives to serve and love others. We can discuss the virtue of friendship and what it means to be a good friend, but when we meet the devotion of Anne and Diana and Anne of Green Gables, that vision comes to life and inspires us to more deeply seek shared experiences with those we love. At its heart, quality literature instruction is a transformative journey that nurtures many essential elements of the human spirit. And I would like to discuss two of those elements today. First, it cultivates the moral imagination, allowing students to explore the vast landscape of human experience and ethical dilemmas through the power of storytelling, which ultimately develops their virtue. Second, It serves as a place to help develop rich and robust vocabulary, empowering students with the tools to articulate their thoughts. These two parts of literature education are not mere academic exercises, but rather they are surrounded by a greater purpose, to instill in our students a profound love for all that is beautiful, good, and virtuous. By fostering both the moral imagination and a rich vocabulary, we can guide our students towards a life enriched by stories that truly make an impression on the soul. Before we can dive into the nuts and bolts of developing the moral imagination and a robust vocabulary within our students, it's crucial to establish a clear understanding of what literature means in an educational context. It's easy, especially in the lower elementary grades, to conflate literature time with learning to read or reading to learn. However, these are distinct educational objectives. Learning to read or reading to learn is not literature because it focuses on developing the skills required to decode and comprehend texts. While learning to read and reading to learn are essential skills that require explicit instruction, they should not be confused with or substituted for literature study. Literature is the time when students encounter and engage with great stories beyond mere skill development. The powerful stories of literature shape our students' imagination, soul, and character. Our students must and should be interacting primarily with these great stories through a strong reader, the teacher, reading aloud. For many elementary students, the skill of decoding and comprehending is still being developed and strengthened. Therefore, most of the literature will be heard, not read. We should not shy away from difficult classical and great literature just because some of our students do not possess every skill necessary to decode the text for themselves. Oftentimes, in upper elementary grades, teachers may incorporate reading skills into their literature lessons. A quality literature lesson does not treat these skills as separate entities, but rather uses the story to direct the types of skills, strategies, and vocabulary that you may want to emphasize in a lesson. This method ensures that the focus remains on the power of the narrative, while subtly reinforcing essential comprehension techniques that will build strong thinkers and citizens. In order to figure out what we should read to our students in literature, we must hold all books and stories to two standards. First and foremost, the selected stories should stand the test of time. Having garnered recognition and appreciation across multiple generations for their enduring value, we must steer away from things that are only popular or immediately enticing. Second, the stories must show us what it means to be human. A good literature book will serve as a mirror to our own experiences and to the lives of others, as well as the intricacies of human relationships. It will also unveil the enchanting mysteries all around us. If a book fits the bill of these two standards, it will be a perfect choice to help grow students' affections for what is good, true, and beautiful. To help students develop their affections and understand what they ought to love and hate, we must allow them to experience and taste the virtues found in literature. Mere instruction in virtue is not enough to nurture the virtues. Martin Buber, a 20th century Jewish philosopher and writer, explains this paradox. I tried to explain to my pupils that envy is despicable, and at once I feel the secret resistance of those who are poorer than their comrades. I tried to explain that it is wicked to bully the weak, and at once I see a suppressed smile on the lips of the strong. I tried to explain that lying destroys life, and something frightful happens. The worst habitual liar of the class produces a brilliant essay on the destructive power of lying. I know I have seen this within my own classroom, and maybe you have too. Telling a student not to lie and instead practice integrity And then they turn around and immediately tell another lie. In these moments, we are overestimating reason and underestimating the affections and the imagination. Therefore, we need to approach moral instruction by activating the imagination. It is better to tell our students that they are not being like a certain honest character from literature when they lie than to say, don't tell a lie. Through the moral imagination, our students begin to recognize these virtues not as abstract concepts, but as desirable traits they wish to embody and can actually do. They come to love these virtues for their inherent beauty and worth. The moral imagination is our capacity to transform specific experiences into meaningful metaphors and images, because the imagination is capable of grasping goodness and truth. When we use these metaphors and images, which have moved us passionately to discern moral truths and empathize with others across time and social boundaries. The moral imagination does not deal in rules, but in webs of images, memories, experiences, stories, and poetry. A vibrant moral imagination flourishes on the foundation of human experience, a resource that young and inexperienced students often lack. Well-crafted stories serve as a powerful experience substitute. As students immerse themselves in these great stories, the stories transform into truly lived experiences, shaping their moral compass and fortifying their character. This process of engagement acts as a form of virtue training, gradually cultivating a heart that is both experienced and virtuous. And ultimately, a trained and experienced heart can love and act upon virtue. The power of a well-nurtured moral imagination, fostered through compelling narratives, often manifests in unexpected and beautiful ways. A particularly striking example comes to mind. One of my students was tasked with getting up, greeting any guests who entered the classroom, and explaining what the class was learning at that particular moment. It was his first day on the job, and a guest walked in. He gave me a deer in headlights look as he walked toward the guest. Nevertheless, he did his duty. Afterward, he delightedly told me the dragon's curse did not overtake me. He did not need to say more. I knew exactly what he meant. This child was referring to the curse of Old Smog, who attempts to trick you into thinking you do not have any courage in a particular moment. The virtue and practice of courage came alive for this student when he took the images from our literature book into his reality. The term moral imagination is attributed to the Irish statesman and philosopher Edmund Burke. In his book, Reflections on the Revolution in France, which he wrote during the French Revolution. He argued that the French Revolution's hyper-rationality eroded the accumulated wisdom of generations and the hard-won solutions of our ancestors. Burke believed the moral imagination would foster, quote, right order in the soul and right order in the commonwealth, unquote. 20th century thinker Russell Kirk elaborated on this idea, defining it as, quote, that power of ethical perception which strides beyond the barriers of private experience and events of the moment, unquote. The most fundamental human experiences and events are outside the realm of reason and logic. Love, beauty, goodness, truth, friendship, mercy, passion, justice. So if we only use cold rationality to try to explain these ideas to our young students, they will not be able to fully understand their complexity and strive to embody virtue in their own lives. This is where the power of tradition comes into play. By drawing upon the collected wisdom and experiences of generations past, found in time-honored stories and history, we can provide our students with a rich tapestry of moral examples and insights. These traditions serve as a bridge between abstract ethical concepts and lived experiences, offering a framework through which young minds can explore and internalize complex moral truths in a way that pure reason alone cannot achieve. How do we cultivate the moral imagination within our students? I have 5 ways that can help you stretch the moral imagination muscle in your classroom. 1, you must read stories and poems daily and read them for fun. You do not need to do a deep analysis of everything you read out loud to your class. More often than not, deep truths cannot be revealed through a discursive analysis. These truths must be experienced through the story itself and savored in the immediate moment that unfolds with the impending danger of a quest or the joy of reunion with a long-lost love. During my first year of teaching, I selected the fairy tale, The Ugly Duckling, believing it would illustrate the virtue of charity to my students. However, the discussion took an unexpected turn when the student, who truly needed to grasp the virtue of charity, raised his hand and pointed out that the story was not about kindness, but in fact about beauty. The child explained that the ugly duckling was an image of beauty. The duckling, despite being ridiculed and rejected by his barnyard friends, sought out the beauty of the graceful swans in nature, while other animals focused on practical matters like finding food and shelter. The duckling's heart yearned for the beauty of the world, ultimately leading him to discover his true identity as a swan. The student is now in 8th grade, and every once in a while, we will get to have a conversation about an ugly duckling moment in his day, a moment where he searched for and found beauty. It dawned on me that stories serve as powerful catalysts for developing moral sensibilities, often in ways we cannot predict. More importantly, I realized that my students possess the ability to uncover profound truths without me leading them through a deep analysis. 2, be mindful of what is being read and listened to in your classroom. In our modern world, we have become desensitized to good and evil. Take the movie How to Train Your Dragon. In this kids' film, the dragons are first perceived as fearsome adversaries. However, as the story unfolds, these creatures are revealed to be gentle beings, misunderstood by the Vikings around them. This portrayal stands in stark contrast to the dragons of classic literature, such as the vile skywinger that claimed Beowulf's life, or the impenetrable dragon that St. George had to slay. This transformation highlights a broader cultural moment and a warning to opening our eyes as educators to helping our students develop a strong moral compass of what is good and evil through what they read. 3, instead of trying to dissect themes with students, focus on discussing dilemmas. Dilemmas do not always have clear-cut solutions. This process activates their moral imagination as they envision various scenarios and consequences, put themselves in different characters' shoes, and grapple with conflicting values and priorities. There is this wonderful English short story entitled Mr. Vinegar. The couple lives in a vinegar bottle, but the wife accidentally destroys their home. So Mr. Vinegar sets out to seek his fortune, but repeatedly makes poor decisions, trading valuable items for less valuable ones. Mr. Vinegar is easily swayed by momentary attractions without considering the long-term consequences of his choices. This story is full of predicaments and places to call your students to reflect more deeply on what they would have done if they were Mr. Vinegar, or how they would react to Mr. Vinegar if they were Mrs. Vinegar. Another classic tale rich with moral dilemmas is the story of King Midas. In this myth, King Midas desires more and more gold, eventually receiving the ability to turn everything he touches into gold. At first, this seems like a wonderful gift, and the class agrees normally. But the gift's true nature is revealed when he tries to eat or attempts to hug his daughter, turning her into a golden statue. This story helps students understand that some things they desire might actually be harmful in the long run, encouraging them to think critically about the consequences of their wishes and actions. 4, let your students read and reread. Repetition is good because it signals happiness for the child. Many of my students would read our literature book independently right after we finished it in class. And I would attempt to encourage them to pick up a different one since we just finished that one. However, they would continue to want to read it. I never understood the purpose of that until I encountered this quote from G.K. Chesterton, the 20th century theologian. A child kicks his legs rhythmically through excess, not absence of life. Because children have unbounding vitality, because they are spirit, fierce, and free, therefore, they want things repeated and unchanged. They always say, do it again, because there is such delight in that thing or activity. The students enjoy the process of failing, learning, and succeeding alongside the characters through the safety and beauty of the book. Encourage them to reread. 5, your students do not need another moral, but a picture of what is good, and they need to learn to love that good. This is a necessary truth to grasp in order to lead our students to become people of virtue. Use literature in your classrooms to develop images of goodness, courage, friendship, perseverance, and justice. In an effort to help my students develop and hold onto these images and metaphors, I often ask them to reflect on the characters in our stories. Who do they want to become like, and why? Which characters should they flee from, and why? What specific things can they do today to become more like a character in a story? I have created a reflection sheet, and this is an example of one I would give to some of my students, that I often have the students do at the beginning, middle, and end of the school year, but also for a child who is struggling with an aspect of their character and needs time to reflect. For example, I ask the student to select a character from literature or history that they admire. They are asked to explain why they find this character admirable and discuss ways they could emulate that character in their own lives. Here is a response from one of my students who chose King Arthur. King Arthur is who I want to be. He started the Round Table because he loved justice and truth in the right way. I want to love justice and truth. He did not always jump to conclusions like I do. After his death, he stood for hope. This year has been very hard for me, and there have been times where I thought my anxiety would be too much and I would not make it through. But the fact that he, King Arthur, will be coming back one day reminds me that I can get better and that my world is not always going to be evil and dark. I can become like King Arthur by believing that there is light in my anxiety and challenges and reminding of my friends of it too. As you can see, the image of King Arthur's gravestone, which reads, "The king that was, the king that is, and the king that will be," becomes a symbol of hope for this child. He did not need just a moral and a trite saying to see the good that can come out of facing a challenge. Instead, the child visualized himself as a member of the Round Table, with the hope that King Arthur would return and restore peace to the chaotic world. This vivid imagery, born from his moral imagination, empowered him to confront his fears with a sense of purpose and heroism, transforming a daunting challenge into an opportunity for personal growth and triumph. The moral imagination, with its capacity to envision virtue and empathize with others, relies heavily on a rich vocabulary to articulate its nuanced insights. Thus, developing robust vocabulary instruction in the classroom becomes crucial for students to effectively express the complex images and metaphors that arise from their moral contemplations. During my initial years as a teacher, I struggled to find effective methods for teaching vocabulary from literature and encouraging students to incorporate new words into their spoken and written work. I often felt like the words would slip through their fingers, as they rarely retained them. When I prompted them to write a sentence using the vocabulary word, the responses were often limited to phrases like, "He is chivalrous." This simplistic usage did not demonstrate a true understanding of the word's meaning. Or, in a classroom discussion, students would try to explain themes, images, and metaphors from the book, but did not have access to the language necessary to communicate their thoughts. To address these challenges and enhance students' ability to engage deeply with literature, we need a structured approach to vocabulary instruction that aligns with developing the moral imagination. The book, Bringing Words to Life, by authors Isabel L. Beck, Margaret K. McGowan, and Linda Kukan, offers deep insight on how to awaken your students to love the complexity of the English language and incorporate more targeted vocabulary instruction through the use of story. In the book, Bringing Words to Life, the authors explain different tiers of the English language. Tier 1 words are basic, high-frequency vocabulary that are most often used in everyday conversation. Therefore, they do not typically require explicit teaching, as students naturally acquire them. Examples include words such as cat, happy, and ran. Tier 3 words are specialized vocabulary specific to a particular subject. These words are often low frequency and require explicit instruction to understand their distinct meanings within that context. Examples include words like equilateral, photosynthesis, and economics. While it is important to help students know and use Tier 1 and Tier 3 words, our vocabulary instruction in literature should focus exclusively on Tier 2 words. The book, Bringing Words to Life, explains that Tier 2 words are high-frequency vocabulary that are commonly used by mature English readers and speakers and are essential for reading comprehension across various subjects. These words, such as benevolent and reason, often have multiple meanings and are crucial for students to express complex ideas and concepts effectively. Tier 2 words are generally not as common in everyday speech, but they appear frequently in written texts. They are words that students are unlikely to learn independently, but are crucial for discussing great literature. Many ethical and moral ideas are abstract and nuanced, requiring a well-developed moral imagination to truly grasp its complexities. Therefore, we must not only enhance our students' ethical reasoning with words, but use vocabulary instruction to cultivate a deeper love for moral principles and virtuous ideals. When scanning my literature books for vocabulary words to introduce, here are 3 things I look for. 1, I look for the word's utility in the classroom and in multiple contexts. Understanding Tier 2 words are beneficial for developing strong readers and strong reading comprehension across various academic disciplines. We should be teaching words that will make our students better thinkers, speakers, and citizens, which means tapping into words common to our ethical written language. 2, I look for words that have a high level of sophistication. Good words to spend time introducing to and mastering with your students should offer a more mature way of expressing a concept compared to simple alternatives. This increased precision allows students to describe emotions, experiences in more detail, as well as give them tools to analyze moral situations with greater depth and complexity. For example, the word ecstatic is a more mature way of saying happy, or the words benevolent and empathetic show more complexity than just nice. When students have an advanced vocabulary, they begin to speak like this. These are quotes from my students from the past 2 weeks. "You foiled my plan. Last night, I was trying to deceive my sister into thinking I was really knighted at school." Or, "Stop tarrying in the bathroom. I want to go to recess." The true value and joy of strong vocabulary instruction is the student's use of the words in their daily life. 3, I look for words that can be related to other words and previously learned content. Effective vocabulary learning hinges on the ability to forge meaningful connections between new words and existing knowledge. When students can relate unfamiliar concepts to familiar terms or previously learned content, they unlock a deeper understanding of language. For example, when I taught the word chivalry, many students were able to connect the word to courtesy. This association enabled students to generate examples of chivalrous behavior, facilitated the understanding of the high standards expected of knights, and established a connection to the fact that all humans possess the capacity to act with chivalry. Therefore, when my class was at an educational fair day, one boy enthusiastically shouted, "Be chivalrous," to the other male students in the group, and everyone knew what it meant. This simple yet powerful phrase instantly conveyed the expectation that they should allow the ladies to go first and that no one should push and shove. No other words need to be spoken. The concept of chivalry was widely understood. The brevity and impact of this exchange underscored not only the power of Tier 2 vocabulary, but the significance of embracing and actively practicing virtue in the lives of students. After you are able to identify Tier 2 words in your literature books, the next step is to master introducing and reviewing vocabulary words with your class. When introducing new words to your class, it is vital that you provide a student-friendly definition. Avoid asking students as much as possible, "Does anyone know what X means?" It is tempting, and I have been there. But for the sake of the students' learning, offer the definition right away. Numerous researchers have studied the false memory effect. This cognitive bias can allow students to remember the incorrect meanings and associations, and as a result, the students might have a harder time learning the true meaning. Furthermore, dictionary definitions can also prove troublesome. Here is some data from some studies done in the 1990s about students writing sentences about words after being provided just the dictionary definition. 60% of students' responses were unacceptable. And from the researchers Scott and Nagy, they stated that students frequently interpreted 1 or 2 words from a definition as the entire meaning of a word. This observation aligns with common experience. Many of us have encountered dictionary definitions that sound jumbled, vague, and disconnected, which often leads to confusion over clarity. To address this issue, we should aim to provide students with more accessible definitions of vocabulary words. A student-friendly definition always explains the word in everyday common language so that students can attend to the whole meaning of the word and not just one part, which is fairly common as cited by some of the researchers' data. Here are some examples of words and definitions I have given my class recently. Covet, strongly wanting something that someone else has. Tarry, staying somewhere when you ought to leave. Amend, to change something in order to fix a mistake. Did you notice anything in common with these student-friendly definitions? Each definition uses the words something, somewhere, or somebody. the authors of Bringing Words to Life highly suggest that these words, something, somebody, or somewhere, anchor the meaning for students so that they can begin to play with the definition and really grasp how to use the word. This is when words become meaningful because students are using and learning concepts and learning the concept and uses represented by the word and not just memorizing a definition verbatim. I often draw inspiration for my definitions from the Oxford Learner's Dictionary. This dictionary is for English language learners, so the definitions are simple and clear. After providing a student-friendly definition, you must provide concrete examples to help the student wonder at the word. In the examples, be sure to highlight multiple contexts to demonstrate the word's versatility, allowing students to see how it can be used in different situations. Finally, you must engage students in word play activities to deepen their understanding and encourage active use of the vocabulary words. For instance, you can play a word association game where students take turns saying related words, phrases, ideas, movies, people. You can also give a sentence that has something to do with one of the vocabulary words, and the students have to identify which word goes with the sentence. Another activity is example and non-example. This is where you ask questions that begin with, what would be, or have you ever, and give an example of the word and a non-example of the word. For example, which would you rather amend? A wrong answer on a math test or your favorite family vacation? What would be romantic? Hearing that a big storm is coming or getting rescued from a ship that is about to sink? To engage the whole class at once, you can have your class cheer if you give an example that matches the definition or boo if the example does not match. This is a favorite of my students. They play it sometimes at recess, which is very funny to watch. Bringing Words to Life has a whole menu, as the authors call it, of wordplay activities that can help you start. Most importantly, an explanation or justification for the choice is needed after any student answers in a wordplay activity. The question, why, must be followed. This ensures that the student understands the meaning and nuances of the word. The explanation for their choices is most useful for vocabulary, language, and moral development. The forced choice activities normally have an expected answer. But if the student chooses the non-example and can justify it, then accept their response. To illustrate how to introduce vocabulary into a literature lesson, I have chosen a small chunk from one of my favorite fourth grade literature books that I teach, King Arthur, and specifically from the story of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. You may listen or follow along on the slides, but see if you can identify any tier 2 words, words that are robust, high-frequency words that appear often in written text across content areas, but are not typically used in everyday conversation. The first blow and the second that struck you not, these were for promises kept. And you truly rendered to me, but the third time you failed, and therefore had the wound of me. You gave me the 3 kisses, but not the green lace. Oh, I know all. She tempted you by my will. Gawain, I hold you to be the noblest, the most faultless knight in all the wide world. Had you yielded to dishonor and shamed your knighthood, then would your head be lying now at my feet. As for the lace, you hid it but for love of your life, and that is a little sin, and for it I pardon you. We're going to do some audience participation. Did you notice any tier 2 words? You can raise your hand. Yes. Pardon, yes, that is a tier 2 word. Anyone? Yes. Rendered, correct. Yes, that would be a tier 2 word. Any other ones? There's a lot in here. Yes. Yielded, yes, correct. Well, I'll tell you all of them. I underlined and bolded them. Rendered, wound, tempted, noblest, faultless, yielded, dishonor, sin, and pardon. So let's look at the verb tempt. I just chose one out of many. And here's a student-friendly definition of the word tempt that I would offer to my students. To make someone want to do something, especially something that might not be good for them. In the story, Sir Gawain was tempted to not share everything he won with the lord of the castle, as he had promised. You may be tempted to hide information from your parents like Sir Gawain, or even a delicious-looking cookie can tempt you to devour it before dinner. Now we are going to do a little bit of more audience participation, so get ready. As I model a wordplay activity that I would do with my students after I introduce the word tempt with a student-friendly definition and some other examples of how the word can be used. Please raise your hand if you would like to answer. What would be more tempting? Staying up late, reading a good book, or waking up early to go to a bakery? Yes, thank you. Why? Great. And so then at this, I would say, so what's tempting about reading? To try to pull out that meaning of tempt, doing something that you probably shouldn't really be doing at that time. And this child would probably say, I want to read under the covers when my parents say it's time to go to bed. And that's why it's tempting. Here's another question. What would you rather have, a friend who always tempts you to have fun adventures, or a friend who never tempts you to break the rules? I'm posing this question to all of you. Yes, thank you. When I posed this question to my class was split down the middle of which one would be better, and it led to a massive 15-minute debate that took away much time. But nevertheless, it's interesting to think about, and the choices that you're giving, the non-example and the example, both of them can be right as long as the student is able to justify their answer. To close, I want to emphasize a point I made earlier. Our students do not need another moral, another reminder to do the right thing, or even a daily strong vocabulary lesson. They need a picture, an image, an experience of what is good and noble. It is our job as educators to offer hundreds of images and experiences of goodness, love, justice, kindness, bravery, and citizenship to our students over the course of a school year, and help them to love that virtue that arises from the image. We must choose stories that are rich in beautiful language and insightful into the human experience, so that students' moral imaginations are enriched and strengthened. I want to end with a quote by modern moral philosopher Alistair MacIntyre that eloquently sums up what the goal of literature instruction should be. It is through hearing stories about wicked stepmothers, lost children, good but misguided kings, wolves that suckle twin boys, youngest sons who receive no inheritance but must make their own way in the world, and eldest sons who waste their inheritance, that children learn or mislearn what a child and what a parent is, what the cast of characters may be in the drama into which they have been born, and what the ways of the world are. Deprive children of stories, and you leave them unscripted, anxious stutterers in their actions as in their words. Let us approach the teaching of literature not as mere academic exercise, but as a profound opportunity to clothe our students with the full wardrobe of the imagination, as Edmund Burke calls it, to equip them to navigate through life with clarity, conviction, and virtue. Let us choose our stories carefully, discuss them thoughtfully, and always strive to make the words on the pages come alive for our students. Thank you.
If you enjoyed this lecture, we encourage you to visit our website, k12.hillsdale.edu for additional information on upcoming Hoogland Center events and other free resources for educators.